Republican Party Chairman Jim Walsh here for our weekly Chairman's Update. Of course, the big news this week has been a gangster shootout, really, in Seattle, really at the beginning of the week, last Sunday, in which several gang members pulled guns and fired at each other and ended up killing and injuring innocent bystanders who were at the Seattle Center area, that area around the Space Needle, for the Bite of Seattle, a kind of local restaurant food festival. It's a story of statewide significance for all of us here in Washington State. Really importance far beyond Seattle and its issues. You know those issues, frankly, incompetent mayor, a chief of police who's been fired, but now maybe there's some word will be not unfired because of the failures of his department and himself around this shooting. Hysterical nonsense published by the Seattle Times, a columnist who's saying there needs to be more gun control because of this gang violence shooting that happened. It is worth noting that the gang members who were firing at each other were largely teenagers. And this is something that's happened here in Washington State because in Olympia, we have softened the law so much on its treatment of juveniles, of people under 18 years old, that what the gangsters are doing is they're making kids under 18 essentially be their enforcers, carry their illegal guns, and when ordered to, shoot each other. Because the older gangsters know that a teenager under 18 caught with a gun or even arrested for a violent crime involving a gun is very likely to be given a slap on the wrist, if any punishment at all, most likely not even charged with anything. There's a crazy, elaborate requirement in our current state law for a juvenile, again, someone under 18, who's been charged with a gun crime or illegal possession of a gun. There's this strange formula for how the juvenile has to have multiple gun offenses before the juvenile can even be charged with a gun crime. If you're concerned about violence involving guns, you shouldn't be for any of this. This is part of the hypocrisy of the progressive left here in Washington. They've created laws that encourage more violence. And I want to point out, this is not gun violence. You'll hear the failure of a mayor in Seattle talk about gun violence. You hear about hysterical legislators and even the current governor talk about gun violence. The problem in Seattle and around our state is not gun violence, it's gang violence. There is no law on the books that would have prevented the thugs, the gangsters at this Bite of Seattle event from carrying guns. They know what they're doing is illegal. The guns are usually stolen. Sometimes they're illegally purchased, but most often they're just stolen. And they're breaking the law from the first breath. These gangsters have no regard for the law. They laugh at the law. And they laugh at left-wing politicians who try to use community as a way to prevent gang violence. It's just silly. We've had a succession of these laws out of Olympia that restrict law enforcement's ability to enforce the law, that restrict law enforcement's ability to even question juveniles who they suspect. And cops on the street know. They know the kids who are in trouble. They know the ones who are inclined toward violence. They know the ones who are in gangs. It restricts, the state law restricts the cop on the street's ability to stop a kid and ask them where they're going and what they're doing. The law at the federal level, nationally, gives frontline law enforcement some discretion to stop a juvenile, or really for that matter, an adult, without necessarily arresting them, and just question them about what's up, what are you doing, where are you going. Nationally, around the country, these are called Terry stops. It's a name of a lawsuit that determined that the law enforcement can do these stops. They don't have to arrest you. Now, if you're stopped by police and questioned, you can ask, am I being arrested? And they have to be honest. If you're not being arrested, they have to say, no, you're not being arrested. And ultimately, they have to let you go. But under a Terry stop, and this is outside of Washington, around the country, the police do have some discretion to stop someone and ask them what they're doing. If, there are rules, the police have to have at least a reasonable suspicion that there may be something illegal going on. They can't just do it indiscriminately. They can't do it in any kind of unfair or prejudicial way. There are rules about it. But here in Washington, we've restricted with state law our law enforcement's ability to do these Terry stops or anything like them at all. If law enforcement even wants to question a juvenile, they have to bring a lawyer for the juvenile into the discussion. And if the juvenile is arrested, as I've said, for a crime, even a crime involving a firearm, a gun, there are all these crazy restrictions on how the juvenile, this is under state law, how the juvenile can be processed and prosecuted, most often not prosecuted. And again, for emphasis, the bad guys know this, and they use this system to get kids from bad situations, young kids, 13, 14, 15 years old, and give them structure, and give them people that seem to care about them, and give them people that give them a mission and a job. And that job is to carry the stolen or illegally gained firearm for the older gangsters. And if there's a confrontation, they're the triggermen, 13, 14, 15, 16 years old. Now, I've had people ask me, well, what are these gangs doing? Fentanyl is so easy to get and so cheap. Are they selling fentanyl? Not so much. Most of the organized street gangs in Washington state are basically pimps. They're involved in what we call human trafficking. It's forced prostitution on people, usually women, sometimes younger boys, into the sex trades. And the gangs run that business in most places. Now, they may sell some drugs too, and they may tell you they're into like the music or rap industry, but the real engine of these gangsters' business model, if you want to call it that, is the prostitution. It's the human trafficking. And that's another crime issue in Washington state that Olympia is ignoring and denying the extent of the problem. It's a major problem here in Washington. So we need to tell the truth about these issues. You're going to hear a lot about the shooting that took place in Seattle, and a lot of the focus is going to be on the mayor who's completely screwed it up, the response, and the chief of police who should be fired. I don't know if the firing's going to hold or not, but an incompetent chief of police. And we had the current governor there at a press conference, really useless, and Congresswoman Jayapal at the press conference, useless. And they're both pointing fingers at the mayor. It's the left eating its own. But I want, when you're hearing all this, I want you to remember, it's Olympia that's created this situation with lawlessness in our state law. That's the real problem. And to wind this up, you do have a chance to do something about all this bad law that's being made. You've heard me talk about it before. I'm going to keep talking about it. Those judges, the judge elections on your ballot right now for the primary and coming up again in November for the general, those judge races, particularly at the state Supreme Court level. We need people to vote for judges who've read the Constitution, will defend the Constitution, and defend the rule of law. In the current primary, as you know, and those ballots are due Tuesday, so it's coming right up, Tuesday, August 4th. We like the following candidates in the state Supreme Court races. In position 1, either Kohlberg or Edwards. We like them both. In position 3, we like David Stevens, Stevens with a V. In position 5, David Larson. Dave Larson may be the best known challenge candidate for the state Supreme Court in the state. A great judge, a great man, will be a great addition to the state Supreme Court. And in position 7, Todd Bloom. These candidates, if they get onto the state Supreme Court, will defend the rule of law. They will not be puppets or rubber stamps for this governor or any governor. They'll be independent-minded judges. That's what we need. That's it for this week. You're going to hear a lot about this Bite of Seattle shooting. See through the day-to-day rhetoric and remember, this is about undermining law and the ability of our law enforcement officers to enforce the law. It's not about gun violence. It's about gang violence. And Washington needs to do a better job in combating gang violence. That's it for this week. Until next time, be well and stay strong.